I never thought I'd see it with my own eyes. 35. Shiny new homes rising on my land, without my say. The HOA called it community expansion. I called it theft. That morning, Karen, the queen of the HOA, screamed on my porch with her clipboard. "You don't own this anymore! You can't stop us!" The cops stood behind her, siding with her like I was the trespasser. My fists shook, my blood boiled, and that's when I looked down at the old lever by the dam my grandfather built, the one that held back half the valley's water. Karen didn't know it yet. But I had the one thing they couldn't find, fence, or bully away. I had the river itself, and when I pulled that lever, everything changed. When I first inherited the cabin, I thought I had stepped into a world cut off from time. The scent of pine carried through the breeze like a lullaby, and the river flowed steady, whispering against its banks as though it recognized me. My grandfather's handprints were everywhere, on the creaking wooden porch, the carved initials on the oak table, even the dam that kept the valley alive. Out here, I didn't need alarms or traffic lights. I woke with the sun, chopped wood, and listened to the forest breathe. Deer wandered close to the garden like I was some harmless intruder. At night, I'd sit on the porch watching lantern light ripple across the dam. The silence wasn't empty. It was full, alive, and it belonged to me. To the west stretched something that didn't belong at all: Silver Pines Estates. A sprawl of manufactured homes, lined up like toys on display, each one boasting spotless lawns sprayed with chemicals to look green year-round. They had mailboxes painted in the same shade of beige, fences the same dull white, and a neighborhood sign so polished it almost glared at the forest. And at the heart of it all was the HOA, the unseen hand pulling every string. They controlled garbage schedules, lawn heights, and even the color of people's shutters. And where there's an HOA, there's always a queen. Her name was Karen. Her voice could slice through silence, and her clipboard was her sword. Every resident spoke her name with a mix of fear and submission. The first time I saw her march up my gravel drive, I knew trouble had found me. I was splitting wood, sweat dripping down my neck, when she stopped short at the sight of smoke curling from my chimney. She wrinkled her nose like I was poisoning the air. "Sir," she called, like I was one of her tenants. "Do you realize your shed violates the neighborhood sightline policy?" Her tone was honey dipped in venom, her smile stretched too wide. I set the axe down slow, leaning on it like a cane, and looked her straight in the eye. "This isn't your neighborhood," I told her flatly. "This is my land. My grandfather's land. I don't answer to your HOA. The air shifted, like she wasn't used to being told no. She tapped her clipboard, her pen clicking like a warning. "Actually, you do," she said, voice tightening. "The HOA voted last month to incorporate this area into our community. You're now part of Silver Pines Estates, whether you like it or not." For a moment, I just stared at her, dumbfounded by the arrogance. Then I laughed, short and sharp, because what else could I do? "Lady, you can vote on whatever makes you feel powerful, but you don't get to redraw property lines. This isn't a democracy, it's ownership. And this land isn't yours." Her smile cracked just enough to show the steel beneath it. She stepped closer, lowering her voice, but her eyes burned with triumph. "You can pretend for now, but rules have a way of catching up. We'll see how long you can last before the fines bury you." With that, she turned and walked back toward the paved road, heels crunching against the gravel like nails in wood. I stood there with the axe in my hand, watching her disappear between the trees, a chill crawling up my back. Later that night, I walked the dam with a lantern, listening to the thunder beneath its calm surface. My grandfather always told me, "Control the river, and you control your destiny." At that moment, I realized I might need those words sooner than I ever thought. I tried to fight them with reason first, walking into the county office clutching my grandfather's land deeds like they were armor. The clerk glanced at the papers, shuffled through some files, and gave me the kind of look people give when they're already defeated. "The HOA has filed annexation rights," he muttered, eyes avoiding mine as if the walls themselves were listening. He spoke in half apologies, promising the matter could be reviewed, but said it might take months before a hearing. Months while the sound of hammers and saws already echoed through my valley. Each delay felt like another theft, another inch stripped away. When I left that office, the papers still in my hand, I felt the weight of bureaucracy crushing heavier than any chain. Back home, the harassment grew bolder, like they smelled blood in the water. Bright red notices appeared on my cabin door, screaming violation in block letters that dripped with arrogance. $200 for unsightly landscaping, $150 for unauthorized wood storage, and even a fine for inappropriate smoke emissions. They knew I wasn't paying, but that wasn't the point. Their game was humiliation. At the gas station in town, I caught whispers trailing behind me. "Unstable woodsman," one voice said, too loud to be an accident. Another called me a danger to the neighborhood. Gossip moved faster than wildfire, and I realized Karen's influence stretched farther than just her little cul-de-sac. She was painting me as the villain, and her brushstrokes were sharp. One afternoon, Karen herself stood on the edge of my drive with two of her board members like she was holding court. "You can't fight progress forever," she sneered, eyes scanning my cabin as though it was something she'd already claimed. I took a step forward, voice hard as stone. "This isn't progress. This is theft, plain and simple." She tilted her head, lips twitching into a smirk. "It's called community," she corrected like a teacher scolding a child. Mitch, a smug realtor with a permanent tan, nodded along while Linda, hawk-eyed and sour-faced, scribbled notes like she was building my rap sheet. I looked each of them in the eye and said, "Funny thing about community, it doesn't mean anything without respect. And you've shown none." Her smirk faltered, but only for a breath. That night, I couldn't close my eyes without hearing nails driving into boards, the rhythm of saws chewing through wood, the endless intrusion of their machines. My cabin felt smaller with every sound, the forest thinner, my air heavier. I paced the floor, the creak of the old boards under my boots keeping time with the storm in my head. On the wall, my grandfather's rifle hung, its wooden stock gleaming faintly in the lantern light. For a moment, I imagined the weight of it in my hands, imagined walking out and silencing their hammers for good. The thought scared me, not because of them, but because of what I might become. I wasn't going to lose myself to their madness, not yet. Instead, I turned to the dam, the silent beast holding back the valley's water. I found the old blueprints tucked in a trunk, pages yellowed but still strong. My grandfather had built it to irrigate fields, but there, marked clearly in faded pencil, was the emergency lever. If pulled fully, the gates would open wide, the river reclaiming its path. The idea clawed at me, equal parts terrifying and thrilling, to use the land itself as my defense, to let nature remind them whose soil they stood on. I walked the dam's edge with my lantern, the roar beneath the calm surface whispering promises. Each step, each breath, the decision burrowed deeper into my bones. The harassment didn't stop, it sharpened. Police cruisers rolled up the gravel road at night, their lights flashing against the trees. Noise complaints, they said, or reports of harassment. I saw the pity in one officer's eyes as he leaned close, voice lowered so Karen couldn't hear. "They've got pull with the sheriff. Be careful, sir. They'll bury you in paperwork if they can't bury you in dirt." When they cut down my grandfather's oak, calling it a safety hazard, something inside me cracked. That tree had outlived 3 generations, roots tangled with memories deeper than any foundation they'd pour. I stood over the stump staring at the rings like scars, and my chest burned so hot I thought I'd split in two. That evening, Tom came to me again, the timid neighbor whose guilt made him braver than most. His eyes darted nervously to the subdivision, lights glowing behind him as he whispered, "Karen's planning a board vote? They're calling you dangerous, saying you should be forcibly removed before things get worse." His voice trembled, but the urgency was real. I looked past him toward the dam outlined in the dusk, lantern light flickering on the restless surface. The roar was louder tonight, more insistent, like it had been waiting for me to listen. I clenched my fists and told him in a voice that barely felt like my own. Then maybe it's time they find out what dangerous really looks like. The morning came heavy with mist, rolling low across the valley like the land itself was holding its breath. I dressed the way my grandfather used to, flannel shirt faded from years of sun, thick boots that bit into the damp earth, and gloves worn smooth from labor. I walked the dam in silence, listening to the rumble of water pressing against its gates, patient and restless. Below me, the subdivision gleamed with early light, sprinklers hissing across artificial lawns. The 35 homes stood smug on stolen soil, fences gleaming white against the dark line of trees. I could almost hear Karen's shrill voice carried on the breeze, rehearsing whatever speech she had planned for her disciples. My hand brushed against the lever and the iron was cold enough to sting. By midday, the cul-de-sac in their perfect neighborhood was crowded. Folding chairs set out like pews before a sermon. Karen stood on a makeshift stage, clipboard in hand, her smile stretched so thin it looked carved. "Today we vote to permanently remove the squatter from Silver Pines," she announced, her words slicing through the chatter. Applause rose from the crowd, hollow and rehearsed, like sheep bleating at the crack of a whip. I stepped forward from the edge of the crowd, boots crunching on pavement that had no right to be there. Heads turned, gasps cutting through the noise as I raised my voice. "Funny," I said, steady as stone, "because last I checked, the squatter here isn't me." The applause faltered, replaced by murmurs as Karen's face flushed with color, her smile twitching like a mask slipping. "You don't belong here," she spat, gripping her clipboard as though it could shield her. "The sheriff's already on call and you'll be removed today." I pulled a folded deed from my jacket, the paper weathered but undeniable, and raised it high above my head. "This is my land, every inch of it. From the trees you cut down to the soil beneath your shiny driveways." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably where he stood, his eyes darting between me and Karen. The crowd leaned in, their certainty cracking like glass under pressure. Karen's voice wavered when she screamed, "Don't listen to him! He's unstable." I smiled then, not out of joy, but because the truth was finally louder than her lies. "Unstable?" I said, my voice carrying over the hushed crowd. "Maybe, but let me show you what stability really looks like." I turned on my heel, pointing toward the ridge where the dam towered above us all. Tom stood there, pale as ash, his hand trembling near the lever. He looked at me once, his eyes wide with fear and loyalty tangled together, and I gave him a single nod. The ground seemed to hold still for one last breath, the world balancing on the edge of decision. Then came the groan of iron as the lever moved, and the roar of water exploded into life. The valley shook as the river poured through the gates, a wall of white foam rushing downward with unstoppable force. It tore through fences first, snapping wood like matchsticks, then flooded yards where manicured grass drowned under mud. Screams rose as water swept patio furniture, toys and garden ornaments away in seconds. Foundations trembled, siding warped, and driveways cracked under the surge. Karen stumbled backward, her precious clipboard ripped from her hands and spinning away in the flood. Her shriek was lost in the thunder of water, her rain dissolving as quickly as the ink on her papers. I stood tall on the pavement, boots soaked, watching their empire bow to the land they had mocked. Karen's face twisted with fury, drenched hair plastered across her forehead, eyes wide with disbelief. "You'll pay for this!" she screamed, spitting water, her voice raw with desperation. I leaned close enough that only she could hear, my words slicing sharper than any fine she had written. "No, Karen," I said, steady and cold. "For once it's you who will pay." The sheriff finally waded between us, shouting orders to calm the chaos. His uniform soaked as he tried to wrangle the panicked crowd. People clutched their children, dragged ruined furniture, and screamed accusations into the air. But through the storm of voices, I felt a strange calm. The land had defended itself, and I had been its hand. So tell me, was I wrong to use the river against them? Would you have done the same? Or walked away and let Karen win? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button if you've ever had a nightmare neighbor, and don't forget to subscribe. Because this battle with the HOA? Oh, it's only just beginning.